want to debunk something real quick because sometimes when we go teach classes, we get asked bad shooting. We want to actually break down the laws, the tactics that were used, and in kind of an in-depth.
Now, by the way, on this Might Be Risky panel was two black cops. One was two former cops, two former black cops. So there were cops on this might Be Risky. There were two brothers who were officers on there, law enforcement officers, police officers. These are police officers. I want to point that out.
Discussion about who this deputy was that actually fired
me for serious misconduct, had a history of
the incident.
Yeah, the deputy involved in this looked like he had a pretty troubled, history. And if you just look at sort of any major news source, they're talking about it. They filed immediately Freedom of Information Act requests on him, his personnel records, and they were able to get a ton of info. So they're saying he was discharged from the Army for serious misconduct, had a history of driving under the influence. I think I read something, maybe he had 2 convictions, for DUI. He had been disciplined from a previous agency for his decision making, right, under high stress incidents. Something about he's in a pursuit. Supervisor tells him to terminate the pursuit, and he doesn't, which is sort of what you got to do. Right?
We are only a few seconds in on this live stream, and there's one thing that stands out to me between the brothers and this white man, and between the brothers and this guy. The brothers, they were all focused on her behavior. These guys are focused on him, the son of a bitch who pulled the trigger, the son of a bitch who said, I'm going to shoot you in your fucking face, the son of a bitch when he came to the damn door and was berating her because she had to put a damn robe on so she didn't come to the door indecent. They were focused on him and his behavior and what was going. They were focused on him. The brothers on This Might Be Risky, they were focused on her. She was the victim. That is wild to me.
Right? You're a supervisor. I was a supervisor. And he continued on and was basically pursuing him with no lights and siren on, which is even more dangerous than just keeping your lights and sirens on and doing it. So he was, a couple personnel memos came out, and I think you can find them online, or certainly the synopsis of them, talking about where one of his supervisors was saying, this guy makes terrible decisions. How are you still employed with us, is what one supervisor remarked, which is pretty darn incredible. And they recommended he take all kinds of decision-making classes. Now, if you also publicly available now is his employment records, which showed that he worked at 5 previous agencies prior to the one he was at when the shooting occurred. It's not to say if you've worked at a variety of agencies, it's necessarily bad, right? We know people that have worked at a few agencies. I worked at one agency and then lateraled, reapplied, I guess you would say, to a new agency. Fine if you want to make a change. However, given the context of the rest of this guy's behavior, it just kind of paints a picture of maybe somebody who has got some issues going on. We don't know the man, don't know what the issues are, but spending less than a year at a bunch of different agencies and getting kind of moving around to all this stuff just maybe speaks to a level of commitment, or, gee, maybe I got in trouble here, I'm going to go move over there. It really looks bad for these agencies as far as their hiring practices. Every one of those agencies, which is mentioned by name, in the press now, locally is under a microscope. Why did we hire this guy? Or these other agencies are going, man, we dodged a bullet by firing this dude or getting him to resign. Yeah. But the agency that did pick him up, where he was ultimately employed with when he was involved in the shooting, knew or should have known, about this guy's history. The last thing I would say just about him, just from some research and really just Googling this stuff, is there's a photo that's kind of going around that shows him. And if you kind of look a little deeper and find the whole booking photo where it's not cropped, you'll see his arms, and he's got a bunch of tats on there. And before anyone in your audience freaks out, like, what's wrong with tats? Mm-hmm. There's nothing wrong with tats. But given the context, again, of what's going on, that is going to come up in court. Right? When he's involved in a shooting and you can see the forearms and see the tats that are on there. I'm looking at his booking photo right now. Maybe you can, splice that in or whatever. Dude's got skulls on his arm. Mm-hmm. There's nothing inherently wrong with putting skulls on your arm. Maybe you like a death metal band that's got that, or you got some good reason for doing that. But I can tell you, as cool as you think that is, when this goes to court and your picture is, you know, this giant photograph of you in front of the court, it's not going to be that cool, you know, and they're going to use it to show frame of mind, right? Now, when you listen to this guy talk, I think he explains his frame of mind, and that's all you need to hear. But that's going to be used against him, as is all this other previous employment stuff. So that's kind of what I found looking at his background.
Yeah, I find it interesting. So being a supervisor, and I'm sure you've probably had the same experience, I think you have cops that are aggressive.
We're about 8 minutes into the clip. These guys ain't said a doggone thing yet about her behavior, her actions, her nothing. But the brothers on this might be risky. Debated her actions, her behaviors. Period. I don't care why they were doing it. They were doing it. They were focused on her. These brothers, this is a 30-minute clip. I'm not going to play all 30 minutes of this clip, but I'm going to play enough of it for you guys to see and try to see the difference between how the brothers were talking about what they decided to focus on versus what these white boys are focused on. And let me remind you one more time. I took two different parts of that stream, clips from two different parts of that stream. So go back and watch it, the full context. Now, I'm being honest. I pulled out two sections. There's about 5 or 6 of them that I wanted to pull out, but I pulled out 2. And for me, the reason why I didn't show you all the different versions of the clips, all the different clips from This Might Be Risky, is because the impression I was getting that from everyone, from every piece of the conversation. They had multiple topics around this, but I was getting the same impression no matter how they were talking, no matter what part of the case that they were discussing. I was getting the same impression from this. It didn't matter what they were talking about. They were focused on this woman's behavior. They were sitting there trying to analyze they were trying to find a way to not justify, but try to find a way to try to make this make sense. This doesn't make any sense. But when you have the mindset that we are not a monolith, we're in danger. And we had 2 cops on This Might Be Risky who could have broke down this stuff like these guys are breaking it down, who could have focused where it needed to be focused on, like these white boys are focusing on what they need to be focusing on, but they didn't. Why is that? Are we so thirsty to not be perceived as race loyal, or that we are perceived that we are not are we so thirsty for the attention and the approval of Big Daddy that our primary positioning in Black society is to be, as men, as to be the protectors, the gatekeepers? Are we so thirsty that we're willing to, that we have just willingly abdicated that because we are not a monolith?
They're great street cops. But they operate a lot in the gray area. And I know you've worked with some where, you know, albeit they're out there maybe doing a good job, but they're pushing the envelope, operating in that gray area. And eventually, like case in point, his supervisor tells him to, you know, cancel his pursuit. He's still chasing the person with no lights and sirens, right? Because he just doesn't have it in him to stand down from that, right? He's chasing the rabbit. He wants to get the bad guy. And so I think that's ego driven. So when you have cops like that, I think it's so imperative that supervisors have to hold cops like that accountable so it doesn't spiral into something like this. And it will eventually, may not be as drastic as this, but it will turn into something where that cop is going to do something to either get himself severely in trouble and or a partner, and to include the supervisor. So I think that's worth noting. If you're a supervisor, you work with people like this who they're skirting that gray area all the time. I think you really got to pay attention to that and not just brush it off as, that's just kind of the guy that he is. It's important. I mean, have you worked with people like that?
Yeah. And I want to mention the multiple agencies that he worked for. You even said it's not necessarily that you're working at that many agencies, you're switching around. There are plenty of people that relocate, different opportunities, but all those were in such a short amount of time. I think it was since 2000. This is a 6 agency since the year 2020. I'm sorry, 2020.
Yeah, I was going to say 2000. No way.
Yeah, within 4 years, it's 6 agencies.
Yeah, you're right.